you would please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right. Roll call to establish a quorum. Amy, if you would.
Supervisor Markane?
Here.
Supervisor Jeannie Vogel?
Here.
Supervisor Linda Waite?
Here.
Supervisor Derek Daniil?
Here.
Chairman Dan Wolfel?
Here. Okay, on the meet and greet, we just went through who we are, at least hopefully you know. If you would start and introduce yourself and where you're from, miss, I would appreciate it. You can sit, you don't have to do anything.
Mary Ann Wied, 6391 Little Harbor Drive.
Thank you. Jim, you'd be...
James Mitchie, 4159 Bayshore Drive, Sturgeon Bay.
Steve, would you introduce yourself, please?
Steve Schneider, Bugtussle Wireless.
Thank you.
Randy Halstead, Jacksonport.
Richard Gurley, 3959 Glidden Drive.
Derek Demise, 4990 North Century Road.
Ron Handy, Red Sunset Lane. Max Chrome, Bluff Court.
I'm Beth Resch, mother of Max Chrome, Bluff Court.
Dave Resch, Sturgeon Bay.
Oh, okay, well, welcome. Thank you. First item on our agenda is public participation, so if somebody has something that they'd like to chat about that's not on our agenda, we give you an opportunity to do so. Would that be you, Jim?
That would be me.
Oh,
It'll be short, don't worry, Dan.
it's okay. We have all night, especially now that we have representatives from the county board.
Well, as usual, I break the microphone. On behalf of the Bayshore Property Owners Association, we're expressing some concern on VRBO and Airbnb overstepping the occupancy and wondering whether and what the town ordinance on this issue is.
VRBO,
Yeah.
at this point in time, it's simply an ongoing discussion item from the plan with the plan commission. I think that's probably sums it up, but I'll let Linda talk to it if you want for a moment.
Yes, the town has been discussing this for over a year and a half, I believe, strictly discussion, with Act 59 that came down from the legislature in the 2017-19 budget. They did address the short-term rentals. Municipalities can do certain amounts of regulation, such as off-street parking, limiting occupancy, per the number of bedrooms, requiring a license, requiring inspections by the building inspector or the fire inspector. There's a list of about a dozen things, Mr. Mischke, that towns can do. The town of Sevastopol is not the only one looking at some type of regulation. So it will be discussed. Like I said, it is a continuing discussion. It will be on the next Plan Commission meeting agenda.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Last call? All right. Our representative from the county board is going to give us a quick summation of what's been happening.
Yeah, I'm Richard Verley. I represent District 15. We're sitting in District 15 as we sit here, where the 15 is basically the eastern half of Sevastopol, Highway 42 over to the lake. That's my district. I'm on the county board representing this district. And I'll give you a little update of a few things going on in the county. Obviously, the most talked about thing is the mask thing. Over the last week and a half to 2 weeks, I've received probably well over 100 emails. They're running probably 80% wanting the county board to make it mandatory in Door County. Probably at least 15 to 20% that are against it. They feel it's violating their rights. And they don't want us to. 2 weeks ago, Chairman Leno called a special meeting of the county board on that Friday. He told us right at the beginning of the meeting it was an informational meeting and it was not going to be a vote on whether we should wear masks or not. We talked about it for a couple of hours, and then he did ask for a hand vote of how we felt, and it was mixed. So, not everybody was at the meeting. Some were virtual, and it was a mixed feeling. I think most people felt they didn't have enough information. I, for one, spoke on it and said that if you're going to make it mandatory in Door County, you're going to have to be very, very careful on the wording. And I was talking to Grant Thomas, our Corp Counsel, because there are people out there that have medical issues. An example would be asthma, where they can't wear a mask. And if they're going to go to one of these stores and they can't go in because of a mask, there could be an issue. I don't think they'd run off and sue them for not being able to go in, but it's going to have to be carefully worded if we go with something like that. Tomorrow is an admin meeting. I'm on the admin committee. It's on the agenda tomorrow. We're going to discuss it some more. Next week at county board, it'll be discussed some more, and I can't tell you exactly where it's going to go from here. I can tell you that I on the news I did see an incident that they were talking about the masks and that a lot of them are not being worn correctly. A lot of them are not being washed correctly. And on the news there was a woman, and I don't know what state it was in, but she was in the hospital very, very ill. And they told the family she probably only had 2 more days to live. And the family demanded that they do more testing. Well, it turned out they did more testing and they found out she had Legionnaire disease, which is a disease that you can easily get from filthy air ducts in your house, masks that are worn over and over and never washed, and you get a lot of germs out of it when you're breathing. And they treated her heavy with antibiotics. About a week later, she went home and recovered. Now, this was just an incident where probably she was wearing masks that were so contaminated, and she got sick, and they thought she was dying from this epidemic, and she was so sick from germs from her mask. So, like I said, the board's going to discuss it more, and I don't know where it's going. I know a lot of the businesses, Bailey's Harbor, Sister Bay, have already demanding you have to wear a mask to go in there. Green Bay, same way. So that's kind of where that is. I think probably most of us know that it was in the Pulse that the Sheriff Department requested all this equipment for the demonstrators and whatnot. And the sheriff felt that she wanted our officers to have the equipment because if Green Bay or Brown County asked them to come down there for demonstrations and stuff, she doesn't want to send them down there unless they have the proper equipment. So the Finance Committee, one person was missing, and it's a 7-person committee. When they took the vote on the $10,000 it was going to take for the helmets and the protective equipment, the vote was tied, and a tie vote, of course, fails. So it was in the Pulse that Adopt a Soldier organization has already donated $10,000 to the Sheriff Department to go ahead and buy the equipment. That was in the Pulse, and I think Sheriff Stern is getting the money to buy some equipment for the officers. So another thing I just wanted to mention for the viewers and people that might be financially in trouble and can't pay their rent. I'm also on the Lakeshore Cap Committee, that's Lakeshore Community Action Program. The main office is down in Manitowoc. And of course, they deal with people that are financially in trouble, and the director down there said that she's received a grant from the federal government for $25 million to help people to pay their rent if they can't. So if you're one of these people that you're behind on your rent a month, 2 months, 3 months, you can go ahead and contact Lakeshore Cap. That would be www.lakeshorecap.org. And you can't go there in person. And I'll also give you the phone number, is 920-682-3737. You can call them up. There is paperwork to fill out. And the limit is up to $3,000 that they can help you with. And if you're paying like $750, $850 a month rent, it can help you get through maybe 3 or 4 months. If you're moving to a different rental, they can even help you with the security deposit. There's money in that bill for that also. There is no money for helping you move, but there is rent assistance for people that just financially can't pay it. At that www.lakeshorecap.org, and that phone number that I gave. And the other thing that I would just mention is Washington Island they are in need of an ambulance garage up there. Right now we're in one of their buildings, and they've actually asked the county to get out of the building because their highway crew up there, they need to have more room in their building and add on it, and they'd like us out of there. And of course, we did an ambulance garage up at Sister Bay years ago. We did the one down at Brussels for Brussels Union Gardner, and of course, the town of Washington wants the county to go up there. And what I can tell you is that this has been worked on now for months, and it's probably a ways yet from figuring out what we're going to do. There is a property up there that's for sale that we could add on to and make it work. Close by, there is some vacant property that we could build a separate building on, but that's what's going on up there for Washington Island. So I guess that's all I'm going to have to say at this meeting for an update, and I'm sorry if I took a lot of your time.
No, I have one. Go ahead.
Biz, it's my understanding that even though the Bugtussle has made the donation for the equipment, that the county board still has to approve it because the donation is like over $5,000, and
Yeah.
that has to therefore go through the approval.
It'll be on our next agenda, and you're right, Jeannie. The county board has to approve the $10,000 donation,
Right.
and as far as I know, there's no other expense to the taxpayers. And this is a pretty common thing on donations. It's almost on all our agendas, all these donations. And I've been on the board for a long time, and I've never seen one turned down yet. So, it'll get approved, I'm sure.
Anyone else have a question? Biz? Linda?
Is the county still exploring another ambulance station somewhere between Sturgeon Bay and the Northern Door Station?
It's talked about, Linda. That they'd like one over at Egg Harbor as well. And, Door County is such a unique county. We're a long, slender county surrounded by water. We're not like other counties where we have neighbors that can come in and help us with fire, police, rescue. We're just a different county being surrounded by water. And often when there's a call, up in that area, do you send the one out of Sturgeon Bay up there, or do you send the Sister Bay? And if you send the Sister Bay, then you need another ambulance to cover. And it's difficult to have enough coverage, to do that. So It's talked about, and I don't think it's in the near future, but probably eventually maybe there will be one over at Egg Harbor. Our population swells so much in July and August and into the fall. So many visitors up here, and of course, the call rate, goes way up in the summer. It's not like it the way it is in the winter. So.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Biz. We appreciate your taking the time.
Yeah.
You're welcome to stay and have coffee and donuts later. I'm sorry. I guess not. That was last month. So,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome. All right. We still need a motion to adopt the agenda. I assume it was properly noticed?
The agenda has been properly noticed.
All right. Motion to approve would be in order.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion by Jean, second by?
Second.
Second by Mark. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. All right. Next step would be approval of the Board of Supervisors meeting from June 15th, the Board of Review minutes from June 29th, and the special Board of Supervisors meetings from June 29th as well. Unless somebody has any changes, additions, or whatever.
I'll move to approve those minutes, but if I could make a suggestion on page 4, line 41. Thank you, Jim Nellen and John Stavinus. Maybe just add for your years of service on the town board and various committees, so that
Sure.
it's clear when someone looks at this 25 years from now.
Boy, you are a dreamer. I think that's a reasonable modification.
So with that modification, I would move to approve and accept the minutes.
All right.
I'll second that.
All right. We have a motion by Linda, second by Jeannie, to approve the minutes from the Board of Supervisors meetings on June 15th, the Board of Review on June 29th, and the special Board of Supervisors meeting from June 29th as well. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, thank you. Okay, at this point in our meeting, we have a long-awaited presentation from Hilbert Communications and Steve Schneider, correct?
Correct.
And Steve is the founder?
Founder,
Owner,
CEO, president,
CEO.
janitor.
Ah, cool, okay. Well, welcome. We're sorry we missed you last month through some confusion, but we look forward to hearing what you have to say tonight. We've had a brief discussion last month, a little bit about Bugtussle and Hilbert, and we're looking forward to hearing the rest of the story from you. So
Very good.
please feel free.
I appreciate your time and the invitation and the dialogue to date. We've been around since 2003, primarily because I couldn't get service at my farm in Manitowoc County. And once I put my own little tower up, all the neighbors wanted it, and then I realized that there's a lot of demand out there in rural areas for broadband. With the COVID-19, we have been overwhelmed, so I apologize if there's things we've dropped the ball on, but there are 30-some school districts we're working with, some of whom may or may not have in-person classes this fall. There is definitely haves and have-nots in rural communities relative to access to broadband. And there's a lot of misunderstandings about what broadband even is. Oftentimes we'll put in a broadband installation and somebody will say, well, my cell phone doesn't work any better, because to some people, broadband means cell phone service. And all of that is sort of getting mixed together today. You can definitely do broadband over most cell phone services. Typically, where you don't have good broadband, you also don't have good cell phone service, typically because it's just been an area that's been ignored, and it's typically an area where there isn't a huge population base, or it's an area where public policy has prevented people from building out certain areas. We currently, as a company, operate about 280 sites, primarily in Wisconsin. We have contracts right now to build about another 300 sites over the next 24 months in Iowa, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. And I'm here primarily because I've gotten several calls from leadership within the township. We've had a couple of phone calls. And initially, I was a little hesitant because Door County is sort of known as an area where you do not build towers, for sure. And it's very difficult to serve because you've got a lot of rock. So if you're putting fiber optics in the ground, it costs almost 3 times as much as it does if you aren't cutting through rock. And so it's both a hard area to service and has historically been a difficult area to zone. So my comment to Dan and Jim Nellen, who initially contacted me, was we're very interested in Door County, but we're interested only if there is a mandate for what we're providing from the residents, because sometimes what happens is the leadership may want to provide these services, and there's some outspoken folks, but there's more folks that don't want it than do. And I may be too old to put up with those battles at this point. So from my perspective, it's important that the community have consensus that they want this before we spend a lot of time and money moving forward. And part of that is a commitment from the community in terms of what is wanted. Sometimes we're asking for a financial commitment. I'm going to be real honest, in Door County, you have so much tourism and there's so many other benefits that, any commitment financially is more a commitment to show that the community is behind this than it is something that we would probably need in order to move forward. Also, it would be a commitment in order to access grants that are available for broadband. There's a lot of money flowing for broadband from different areas and resources. We just filed for something called the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, which has some funds available within the town and within Door County. The federal government has allocated $16 billion in a reverse auction that will be starting sometime in October, so we are registered for that. We have historically participated in the Wisconsin Public Service Commission Broadband Expansion Grant Program. That is typically a joint effort where the township or the county provides some funds, we provide some funds, and the state provides some level of matching funds. We last round, which was last December, we received just under $4 million for 6 different projects in Menominee County, Greene County, Iowa County, Kewaunee County. And the Kewaunee County grant is something that also makes this a little more attractive to us because historically we haven't been in the area, and Kewaunee County felt strongly that they needed additional broadband. I will tell you that we have some critics down there that have gone out of their way to indicate that they really don't feel that broadband is a necessary service. We've done some analysis on the town of Sevastopol, and it isn't the easiest area to serve from a wireless broadband standpoint. What we like to do is both create a network that can be used for wireless broadband. We provide service up to 100 megabytes per second from our network. Our retail plans are typically 25 megabytes per second. And to give you an idea of what that means, if you're streaming Netflix, you're streaming at 4.8 megabytes per second with a minimum of about 2 megabytes per second. So if you have 2 megabytes per second and you're streaming Netflix, you will be able to do it. It will just buffer for extended periods of time where the wheel spins and you wait for it to load, and then it runs a while, and then it starts getting choppy, and then it stops for a couple minutes, and then it starts again. That's because you don't have the full 4.8 megabytes per second that it requires to do full-blown video. With the COVID-19, we've been experiencing a lot of students and folks working at home that have had difficulty getting service in rural areas. So we've come up with some special plans for school districts specifically where we're discounting it, and we're sort of, so I wanted to give you an idea of rates because that's usually something that the general public has a strong interest in, because in addition to having it, it also has to be affordable. And so typically if we're partnering with a community that we call a Bugtussle community, we would put our preferred rates in place in that particular community, which is similar to what we're offering the school districts that are buying services, in some cases for all of their students. So we offer a 4.8 megabyte plan, which is good for one person streaming video at $31.99 a month. And that's unlimited throughput. So you have two things. It's like the miles you travel with your car and the miles per hour that you're traveling. So the miles per hour that you're traveling is the 4.8 megabytes per second. That's how fast your digital highway is going. Some companies will limit you to, say, 50 gigabytes per month. So when you get that many cars through the pipeline, if you will, or down the highway, they either reduce your speed or cut you off. We do not do that. We have unlimited access. So as much as you can fit down your pipe, there's no additional charges beyond that. We have a plan that's 9.6 megabytes per second, which means you can have somebody streaming a video in the kitchen and somebody else watching AT&T TV in the living room, for instance, using your internet connection for $47.99 per month. We have a 14.4 megabyte plan for 3 users at $55.99 per month. And then we have a 25 megabyte per second plan, which means you could have 4 different TV shows going on, if you will, at one time, 4 different Zoom streams going on, and still have adequate capacity for somebody to surf the internet. So, and that is $71.99 a month. Where we get public service commission grants, we actually discount that down to $50 a month for the 25 megabyte plan, primarily because it gives us a benefit in getting those funds allocated to us, because they use a rating system that if you're $50 a month or less, you have a higher rating on getting grant funds. So that's just a little bit about the services that we offer. We do a lot of work for AT&T, so we typically want to provide AT&T cellular service. We make our network available to all carriers. Verizon does roam on us in certain spots. T-Mobile roams on our entire network, and Sprint is now merged with T-Mobile, so the Sprint customers have moved over to our network where we provide it. And again, other carriers can choose to roam on our network. It's up to them. We have several that do not at this point. US Cellular does not. Cellcom does not at this point, but may in the future. In terms of what it would take, both geographically and financially, to build out the town of Sevastopol, we've looked at a number of different options, and I like taking a 3-phased approach. And phase number 1 would be putting broadband service on existing towers. I prefer to use towers that are already there versus building towers. It's easier to zone. It typically doesn't require zoning to just attach antennas to an existing location or very minimal zoning. And there are several towers in the township. We would probably go on a 485-foot tower that is owned by a company called Madam Aerials, that is on Whitefish Road and, Whitefish Bay Road and HH on the western part of the township. There's also an existing tower outside of the township at Carlsville, owned by Vertical Bridge, and they typically are good to work with and have rates that are affordable to provide the services that we provide. So we would go on that tower, which is just north of Town Line Road, but would serve well into the north side, about half of the north side of the township. There's another tower owned by Door County that is a 425-foot tower significantly north of the township on Sunny Slope Road. I'm assuming it's probably a 911 communications tower that we would approach the county on co-locating on that tower, which would cover a portion of the northern side of the township over toward Clark's Lake, but not covering Clark's Lake. So those three would be existing towers that we could probably have services on in an 8 to 12 week lead time to get the FAA approvals, the FCC approvals, and so on. So that would be stage one, and stage one would cost us about $195,000 to get those three sites on. And I like to start slow because that tells me what the demand is in the township in general. And so, you know, that's something that we would like to do this fall, if possible. The second phase would be actually building some additional towers in the township. And I know there's been some issues with county zoning and some, you know, discussions and whatnot. From our perspective, there are a number of areas that really don't have adequate tower facilities to provide wireless broadband service, particularly on the southern and eastern sides of the township. So we are looking at initially 3 towers and then an additional tower that we would withhold and see how much coverage we get from the first 3. And so the 4th tower is out what I call Rural Institute. So it is basically slightly north and west of where we're sitting here. And I noted that I have no bars on my phone here in this building, and I sort of zigzagged my way up here, driving where I was, you know, would plan to put that tower in. I have no service. I stopped and talked to a couple folks walking on the highway who said they have very poor broadband, almost dial-up type of service where they are. So I think that that is an area that has been somewhat neglected. The initial 3 towers, we're looking at one on the far south edge of the town that would actually serve somewhat into the city of Sturgeon Bay, near Brower Road and Highway T. We're looking at another that would be somewhere near a small dead-end road called Bechtel Road. And then another that would be south of Clark's Lake. The spot I initially looked at, just to have a point of reference, is Moeller Road, which again is a dead end off of Nelson Lane, although anywhere at that level south of Clark's Lake would cover the whole lake, all the homes around it. and also be able to shoot in over by Cave Point Drive and Shower Road coming down from the township north of you into the Clarks Lake area. So that is a little bit of a point of reference. I'm going to pass out some maps for the town board just for your reference.
Did you have a cost on constructing those 3 or 4 additional towers?
I do. I'll
Get to that.
come back
Okay.
around to that. There's a red line on this map, and that red line is actually stage 3, which would be a fiber optic build, because typically if the wireless broadband service is successful, you still need to connect it into something with higher bandwidth. I'm not a big believer in fiber to the home because I've never seen a car going down the road with fiber coming out of the tailpipe, and people today want mobility. They want the ability to take their broadband service and leave their house, go in their backyard, go to the grocery store. The kids are watching movies regardless of where they are. They're able to do homework. You're able to work from wherever you are. You're able to FaceTime, video conference wherever you are. So we like wireless as the last mile, but it's still critical to have fiber in your township to be able to aggregate the traffic and have high-speed traffic. One of the things that we do on our network is we have something in Madison called a peering location. We have our data core, which is basically where the switching and routing occurs in a building. It actually has Park Bank in it, just coming into Madison on the northeast side of Madison, and that's where we have about $8 million of routing equipment in that building. And we also do peering at that location, where instead of sending your Netflix traffic and your Hulu traffic and your AT&T traffic and your Verizon traffic and your University of Wisconsin traffic through the public internet, we actually meet with those entities there and hand that traffic directly to them. So if you represent 100% of your traffic going through us to the internet, we only deliver 20% of it to the internet. The other 80% we deliver directly to the providers, so that if the main internet is clogged up and slowed down, we're able to go directly to Netflix, to Hulu, to these other service providers. TDS we go to, Wisconsin Independent Networks we go to. There's, I believe, 27 participants in the peering location in Madison. That's extremely important because, again, there's a lot of things that are misunderstood with broadband and the internet. And sometimes people will call us on the wireless network and they'll say, well, I have 5 bars, but it's going as slow as possible. Well, it may be that you have 5 bars, but it may be that the internet is clogged behind that, or from that tower, they're using microwave, and that has a limited amount of bandwidth, and there isn't enough of a highway there to get all the cars you're sending down the highway out at the speed you're sending them at. And consequently, you may think you don't have good service, but you actually do. There's just a clog somewhere further downstream. So it's very important how the network is designed. And that's why I like talking about phase 3 up front, because I regrettably in the past have not always talked about that, and then we do a deal with a township or a county, and 7 years later it's highly successful, and we say now we have to put fiber in or the network's going to come to a halt, and everybody says, well, you didn't tell us about that up front, and we didn't need it up front. But if it's highly successful and everybody is using this network, at some point in time it requires aggregation onto a fiber optic network. And so I like putting the estimate of that cost in there. I've coordinated with several other providers who already have fiber in the area. We would probably connect to fiber that Cellcom owns in Door County, that they're using for their cellular network. We have a good relationship with them. So, the red line on your map sort of dead ends at certain spots. Those are the spots where we would connect to someone else's fiber, but we bring in most of the towers on the eastern side, and the towers on the western side, there's already fiber running up there. We would just lease that fiber from someone else. There's already fiber running up Highway 42 through Carlsville. We would lease that fiber from someone else. So it isn't that we've forgotten about the west side of the township. There's just existing facilities there, so it would be more economical and better for the environment for us to lease facilities there rather than putting them into the rock.
Doesn't Sevastopol have fiber, dedicated fiber right now? I think they do through Cellcom. I think they bought something from Cellcom.
Yeah, and that is very likely, and you'll see that I am not coming through Institute with our fiber.
Right.
And part of what I do is, one of the incentives for other carriers to work with us on this is they may have single points of failure. So when I sit down and talk through this, I complete a ring that their fiber completes, and then they give me use of their fiber in exchange for use of my fiber. So we don't want to go where there already is fiber, but it will enhance it, because I believe right now, if the fiber coming to Institute gets cut, you're dead in the water because there's not an alternate route. What this would do is it would create an alternate route because we would connect. So you'd probably have to have 3 or 4 fiber cuts simultaneously, which is very unlikely to happen in order to lose service, because you always are able to route the other way. The other thing that we would do here is these 7 sites would all be on a microwave ring. So if they're, before that fiber ring is created, if there's a failure, we have 2 different points that we drop into fiber on the microwave. And if a microwave fails, we can go the other way around the ring. So again, we need 4 points of failure before you have an outage. The phase 2, the cost, depends on some other things that we're working on. And if we do it just as a broadband network, it costs us less, but we get a lot less revenue, so it really ends up costing us more. If we do it as a combined cellular and broadband network, the cost goes up, but we also get a lot more revenue, so we need less long-term capital dollars because there's more cash flow day one. We are working with several carriers on that, and I am fairly confident that 2 of them are going to come on board, but these are, very large Fortune 500 companies that don't make decisions about the town of Sevastopol just because I asked them to. So sometimes it takes months and sometimes it takes years, which is why I do this in phases. I'm fairly confident that once it's built, they will come on board. I'm actually incenting them by telling them I will give their customers free service for the first year while they get it all integrated into their systems. I've done that before, and it's paid off quite well to do that, because you do get the AT&Ts of the world that will sign on, knowing that they've got some time to run it through their budget processes every other year and all of those types of things. So the cost, if we do just broadband, no cellular, for Phase 2 is $1.43 million. The cost, if we do cellular and broadband, some things get used in both networks, but the overall cost goes up to $1.675 million. The break-even point changes from needing 778 broadband customers to needing 280 to break even if cellular is on. So it changes the whole break-even point, and it changes the dynamics somewhat dramatically. We've taken this to our board of directors. We have a fairly closely held company, but we do have a board of directors, and we do have 12 or 14 shareholders total. The company is controlled by myself and one other family. That family is Paul Gale and his daughter and son-in-law. Paul was the owner of Lunda Construction. Paul is 91 or 92 years old, and he's been my partner since the beginning, and he's the most aggressive, technologically advanced 91 or 92-year-old that you'll ever meet. So he's far more aggressive than I am. You know, Steve, just go build all the doors empty, was his comment. So, so pretty much Paul and I can make the decisions. We do have other shareholders that we have a fiduciary responsibility to, but our board has indicated that they're comfortable with us proceeding with this. We've put out, so if you look at all three phases, including fiber, the total project that we're looking at internally is about $2.7 million. We're prepared to fund the first 1.1 million of that, and we would apply for grants for phases 2 and 3 that would equate to about $880,000, say $900,000. So what we would be looking for is sort of a phased commitment from the town, not to put money in, but to lend money at a low interest rate, because you can borrow money at a lot lower rate than we can. And so what we've done with Kewaunee County, what we've done with Sauk County, Fond du Lac County. Fond du Lac County is sort of our poster child, because Fond du Lac County bonded $5.9 million for us. We did not put money into Fond du Lac County. They paid for the whole project, and we paid them back over 12 years. And we started that in 2012, so we are 8 years into that. We've never missed a payment. It was bonded as a conduit bond, so you can go out on the bond sites and actually look up our rating, which I believe is big A, little a 2 or something like that. It's generally moved up because it starts at a lower level, and as it gets paid down, as payments aren't missed, the rating has, gone up, and it's publicly traded. So we did that, was one of the first ones that we did. And we did Adams County that way. We did, Sauk County was a little different because we used their network and did things back and forth there. We have some townships, the town of Franklin in Manitowoc County, which is Menschelville, if you know where that is, that had some extra money and had 1,400 residents, and said we're losing our young people because we don't have internet here. And so they indicated to us that they would give us $250,000 to build a tower, and we said we'd like to build 3 towers, but we don't want you to give it to us, because to me there's always a stigma attached to taking free money. There is no such thing. So we said, give us a 12-year note the way we did Fond du Lac County, give us a 2% interest rate, and we will pay it back. And that's what we are doing and have done there. And those towers have been very good for us and very good for the town. The issue we have is now all the neighboring towns don't have service, and we're pulling off the edges of our town of Franklin towers, which sort of degrades the service for the town of Franklin. So we're getting a little bit of a bad rap from people saying, well, why can't you, we can see your signal, why won't you let us go on it? But, so we're working with the town of Morrison and town of Holland right now to expand into those townships, which all has been quite well received. So that is really the gist of how we operate, where we would put the towers, the type of financial arrangement. I'm not coming to you tonight to ask for anything. I'm just coming to you tonight with information and a framework that we would be comfortable with. And again, I cannot emphasize enough, I think it's important to get public input at the outset on this as it relates to zoning, land use, and broadband, because I hate putting a lot of time in things and then you run into a buzzsaw at the end because there's a bunch of very vocal folks in the town that don't want this. And so I'd rather we talk about it up front, hold whatever public hearings you need to hold up front, public listening sessions. Jason or myself, or we actually just hired a business development manager for this particular market, including Kewaunee, Dorr, and Manitowoc County, Scott Naskovitz. So, any one of the three is available. We sort of alternate in and out as there's different things going on. I have 5 different meetings I'm presenting at this week in the evenings. So Jason and I sort of swapped some so that we could arrange our timing. So with that, are there any questions from the town board specifically or overall?
Okay, that was a lot of information.
Sure. Who wants to
Well
start?
done.
It was
Very well done.
I do have a financial summary as well that you can reference, that references the numbers that I provided.
One quick, easy one. What's the typical range that your signal reaches? And what's the proposed tower heights for the 3 towers in phase 2?
On the sheet I just handed out, the third column has the tower heights. So Brower Road and Highway T would be 250-foot guide tower. Bechtel Road would be a 250-foot self-support, so it has a very small footprint at the base. Moeller Road would be a 250-foot self-support, and Rural Institute would be a 199-foot guide. The range typically depends on the geography and the vegetation. We need to be above the tree line, and we need to be able to see down into the cracks and crevices. This is not the easiest area to serve, so we started with a little broader and pulled it back into about a 3-mile radius. So we're figuring solid coverage out 3 miles. That doesn't mean you can't get it out 4, 5, or 6 miles. In South Dakota, we go out 21.5 miles. 21.5 miles is at 300 feet is the distance between the top of the tower and the horizon. So that's the curve of the earth, 21.5 miles. It's an interesting little trivia thing. When you're looking at the sunset, you're looking 21.5 miles into the distance if you're at 300 feet above ground level.
Okay. Well, I'm sure, go ahead, Linda.
Well, I'll start with the tower height. And luckily, we have a Door County Board Supervisor here that can correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't our tower ordinance, the one that we just adopted, so maximum of 120 feet or less does not need a permit. So anything over 120 feet in height would need a permit. Have you run across that in other counties in Wisconsin that you have not had any trouble, getting a permit?
It depends. Some are more difficult than others. And at 120 feet, we could still build and serve at 120 feet. But what happens is, when you drop that 100 feet, you can't see down into the cracks and crevices, and you pull coverage in against the tree line. So what you do is you propagate more towers, and I hate more towers. You know, it really, there's a reason why the county's towers are like 425 feet. It's because for the E911 system, for the 911 radios, when they built those, probably, some of them were probably built in the 50s and 60s and 70s, you wanted to be high enough up that you could see the whole county and get good service. So what you do is you bring those down, and it's a public policy decision. And having served on town boards and county boards myself, you know, one of my issues always is with a town that says, we want to conserve the land and the nature of the land, so we're going to require a 5-acre lot. So you got this development where everybody has a 5-acre lot, and it's just urban sprawl all over these farmlands. And I'm an old farmer, so I hate to see beautiful farmlands put into lawns. You know, it's the same thing with towers, where you put up one 300-foot tower or you put up 4 120-foot towers. How many towers do you want out there? I purposefully picked 199 for Rural Institute. Carlsville is a site I built when I was VP and COO of Cellcom. 199 is the lighting threshold. So at 199, the tower doesn't need lighting unless the FAA requires it. The FAA can require anything they want at any height, but typically if you're at 199, you're safe. We looked at taking the 250s down to 199s, and it would have meant 2 additional towers to get the service. So, you know, so do you want 3 towers at 250, or do you want 5 towers at 199, or do you just want to leave some areas unserved? And that's always an option, because the unserved areas aren't going to be the huge swaths that you have today. But, you know, what I tried to do here was get the best coverage. The other thing is, I made this mistake in Kewaunee County. I said, we're going to serve nearly all the customers. And somebody is now going off the deep end saying, Steve Schneider said all the residents. I'm never going to serve all the residents. I'm always going to find somebody that's buried in the bottom of a cavern somewhere, or that has an underground survival space that the signal doesn't get to, or that has lead walls in their barn, or, you know, 4-foot stone walls, you know, so, you know, they're without windows, you know, it'll come in a 4-foot stone wall in an old barn, but if you had a window, if you don't got any windows, you got some issue there. So, I don't know, I probably babbled on here a bit with your fairly simple question, but there's a reason we picked those heights. And, you know, I think that usually people are reasonable, that if they understand on the zoning committee why the height is important, and we'll try to pull it down as much as we can, you know, which I've already done here. You know, and to give you an idea, you know, you probably know some of these towers. HH and Whitefish Bay Road, those are between 480 feet and 1,100 feet. So those are big towers. Why there's so many of them there, I don't quite understand how that zoning happened, but it probably happened before there was zoning. You know, you know, the one at Carlsville, right off to the west side of the road, is 199 feet. There's a little one that's got antennas halfway down coming out of Sturgeon Bay. That one is 120 feet. It's a self-support.
By the roundabout.
That's the old Sprint Tower, right? I think that's
By
what
the
Sprint
roundabout,
Tower.
yeah.
Could
That's
be it.
120 feet?
Yeah, if I'm driving up, like Culver's is on the left, and you see a tower that has antennas halfway down. The reason they're halfway down is that tower used to serve the northern side of Sturgeon Bay. And as carriers added more towers within Sturgeon Bay, suddenly they were interfering because it went too far, so then you start bringing it down. In rural areas, we typically don't have that issue because, you know, we want to blast as far as we can get from the height we've got.
Well, if you're on the towers that you talked about on the west side, the multitude of towers, how high up would you go on one of those towers, and would that eliminate the need for a tower somewhere else if your line of sight is good?
We would go 300 on the 485 footer. We'd also go 300 on the county's 420 footer. But that's about as far as we can go without causing interference because we can't, you know, go too far. So it, you know, you sort of play with this stuff. You put it in a RF propagation model and you look at where there's interference, and then you lower it or heighten it until you don't have any red areas showing interference.
Okay, makes sense.
Yep.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
How do you go about guaranteeing that you're going to have the required number of subscribers? So you said if we went with just broadband, we'd need almost 800 customers. If we go with the cellular and broadband, just 300 customers. How would a town or a municipality go about guaranteeing that we're going to get 300 customers or 800 customers?
I'm an entrepreneur because I'm a risk taker, and that's
Good for
part of the risk that you take. Now, I'm going to do everything I can to mitigate that risk. So at some point, either you or I are going to have informational meetings about this. At that time, I'm going to ask who's interested, and I'm going to ask people to sign up for service at the outset. And if I get to the end of the informational meetings and I haven't found a single person interested in getting service, I'm going to back out of this.
Okay.
And I've done that in the past.
Well, we had a comprehensive plan meeting, and granted it was a small number of people, but I think it was the number one issue was high-speed internet service out of the people that, you know, gave us their input. So I think it's, and we have a board member over here that apparently can't check his mail because he doesn't get his signals, and, you know, you could start at his house. But
Please start in my yard. That's my question. What do the landowners get?
We typically pay $3,000 a year for, we prefer a longer term lease. We prefer up to a 40-year lease. We'll do less. So typically you're taking, you know, an acre of land and you're getting $120,000 for that land, and you're getting use of the land despite getting the lease payments. So, you know, and we only do rural areas. You know, we would not be interested in Sturgeon Bay. We're not interested in Green Bay. And in those communities, you know, people pay a lot more. But typically in our areas where we're looking for a corner of unused farmland, it's $3,000 a year. You know, if you know, and that's not to say that's not negotiable. Sometimes we'll do an upfront payment. Sometimes we'll pay for a permanent easement. So, you know, it sort of depends on what the landowner. So, you know, we like to have our site acquisition. People sit down with the landowner and say, okay, do you want money up front? Do you want an annuity? Do you want this as something that goes to your kids, you know, forever? Or, you know, so, you know, and we'll have people that say, oh, I don't want a $250 check every month. You know, how much can I get if I just take the first 10 years up front and we net present value that, and, you know, you can get an upfront payment of $20,000 or $25,000 that we probably typically then do a permanent easement versus a lease. So it becomes an easement that's filed on the property that allows our tower to go there. Typically there's requirements with utility easements as well, because we want the ability to bring fiber into that. Door County is particularly difficult in that area because back when it was served by the old GTE, General Telephone and Electric, they did blanket easements. So basically they went to a farmer and said, we want an easement to put telephone lines anywhere on your farm that we want them. Well, our financing partners don't like that because we don't know where you put those telephone lines. So we typically have to get clearance from the successor to GTE, which may be Verizon or maybe Frontier. Frontier's in bankruptcy right now, debtor in possession, so they don't have the ability to sign off on those easements. So there's a lot of stuff with that whole easement issue, but at a high level, that's pretty much the program for landowners.
What's expected from the landowner? Anything upkeep, cleaning, open so you can get in there with vehicles or anything?
Nothing.
Okay.
We plow snow if we need to get in. We pay for a road to get in. Typically do breaker rock 6 to 8 inches and then fine gravel, groom it. We have some folks that like keeping an eye on the tower for us. So we have a monitoring system, but we wouldn't need a monitoring system because I got a guy out in La Crosse. He calls me every night the first couple times the tower was on. The light's flashing so many times a minute right now. Is it supposed to be doing that? But we usually, before we get a call, we usually know that it's, if there's a light burned out on a lit tower, and then we report that to the FAA.
What's the blue circle in Valmy? There, I know where it is, but what is the blue?
That's an existing tower that US Cellular has.
It's not high enough?
It's not high enough.
Okay.
It's high enough to serve that corner there in Valmy. In fact, that would be a spot, back when I was running Cellcom, I would have just gone on that guy's silo because that was big enough to cover that footprint of that curve there where you lost service. But they've got a little tower there, but it really doesn't do anything for our purposes.
I don't get service off that tower.
Off raise?
No. So, I mean, and what's not even 2 miles as the crow flies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
It covers that corner.
you have some questions, Gene?
Actually, everybody asked kind of what I was looking
Oh,
for.
there you go.
And he answered, I mean, he gave us a lot of information. It's a lot to plow through.
Okay. Obviously, we have interest. It's a lot of information to digest. What will happen, Steve, is we're gonna, Gene chairs our Technology and Communications Committee, and we're gonna give it to them, sit down and kind of regroup, figure out where this goes, what we can do, how we can move ahead with it if we can. And they have a meeting scheduled for, what,
Tuesday,
Tuesday?
28th, yes.
Oh, okay, sooner than I thought.
Is it okay if Derek has some questions? He's on the
Sure.
committee.
Technical questions.
Yeah.
So, let's just, and I'm assuming, let's just say one of the towers is the one on town line. Probably the town line, I don't know, I haven't seen the map, but is it town line in Country View? Henschel's?
There's a tower. No, they don't have, Henschel's is on there, but it's not one of the ones they're going on.
Okay, well, anyways, so my question is this. The technology that well, first of all, when you started off your presentation, you said up to 100 megabits down. The packages you gave, and which you also listed on your website and stuff like that, the max is 25 megabits down. My question is, what technology are you using to connect to the towers to the home service? Is it cell phone frequencies, or is it microwave line of sight, first of all?
We do some of both, and so it depends on what frequencies are available. So when I was presenting, I mentioned the fact that it costs us more if we have licensed spectrum, cellular spectrum, 700 megahertz spectrum. So the reason it costs more is because then we're putting cellular transmitters in, and we're using a technology called 4x4 MIMO, multiple input, multiple output, which basically uses send and receive on the same antennas, and so actually out of the antenna coming out of the top of the tower, with MIMO we're coming out at about 250 megabytes per second. With Cambium, which is a line of sight, which we use where we don't have access to spectrum, we're coming out the top of the tower at about 120 megabytes per second.
Okay, so the other question that I had is, well, whatever, so you have the in-house modem. So say you're paying for the 25 megabits down, are you gonna get the 25 megabits down, or is that guaranteed? Or let's just say for the sake of argument, I'll tell you what I'm using US Cellular Mobile right now. I'm obviously probably pulling off the Valley US Cellular tower. I don't know, sometimes I get 13 megabits down, sometimes I get 5. I know that modem, if I take that modem to the US Cellular office in Sturgeon Bay, it can pull down 100 megabits down. It all depends on where that modem is, based upon the tower.
Actually, it depends upon how much traffic is on that site, because with cellular, you're using a shared resource. So it prioritizes voice over data. So if you're using data and you're measuring data, and there's a ton of voice users, it always prioritizes voice first. So certain times of the day on a cellular network, it will seem like it's really fast because there's nobody talking. And then other times during the day, it'll be really slow because you have a ton of traffic, or there's an accident on the highway and there's a ton of people using it, and that reduces the overall throughput. The other thing is you do oversubscription. So in other words, if we have a Cambium site coming out at 120 megabytes per second, we're going to sell 8 rate plans on that particular antenna. So we're going to oversubscribe 2 to 1, assuming that not everybody is using their internet at the same time, not everybody is browsing. Now more and more people are streaming and using it simultaneously, but a lot of our competitors are oversubscribing like 11 to 1, 12 to 1, 6 to 1. So we play it pretty cautious on the 2 to 1.
Okay, well, but you just brought up another question. If, like, say, you have the 2 options. One, just the cellular, or just the standard internet model, and then the internet and voice model, or the cellular. Now you said, so what happens if you get a lot of voice subscribers, because there's much needed, as you even said earlier today, service is really bad for voice. What happens if this new tower that you put up takes all the resources of that tower for the voice? It's still not going to help the internet off that tower.
So with Cambium, with the no spectrum, I'm not doing voice. I'm doing strictly data, strictly internet. What I'm doing when I do cellular is I'm doing both, typically. So I have some that's dedicated, so it depends on what rate plan you're on as to what network you're going to get. If you're on a 25 megabyte plan, you're not going to have it mixed with voice. If you're on a 4 megabyte plan, it probably will be mixed with voice. And that's just part of the efficiencies of running the network.
I mean, I've seen on the Bellevue Tower, because I don't normally get service, I've seen exactly what you described. Seasonal visitors, it's impossible. Wintertime, I can get a signal, you know, and it just varies based on demand, so I understand that issue, so.
Glad you have a question.
Yeah.
Yes, I have a comment and a question. Sir, are you familiar with the difference between a digital bit and a digital byte?
Yeah,
You've been
8 to
quoting.
1.
Yes. You've been quoting bytes. I don't think you're offering anywhere near that service because most people are going to quote in bits. So 100 megabits, see, Derek is talking bytes and you're talking in bits, and you're roughly 8 times difference here. You might want to check with your engineers, because to credit, say you have 100
We're
megabytes
quoting
available.
bits, but bytes are the payload, so when I say you have unlimited, it doesn't matter on our network how many bytes. So normally your providers are saying 4.8 megabits per second, but then they limit you to 50 gigabytes.
Right.
We don't have any limit, so the bytes are somewhat irrelevant, and you're right, if I said bytes, I should be saying megabits per
You
second.
only said bits once just now. Everything should be bits to be accurate. Otherwise, you're promising something you can't deliver. And people are misunderstanding you. Okay, that's all.
All right, well, Steve, think everybody's question's been answered for the moment, and we don't want to keep you, and we also have to move on. But we will have Jeannie committee start with this next week, figure out where we're going to go. I'm sure we'll have a few questions. And we'll
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
Steve.
Different cards, Steve.
Very comprehensive presentation.
Thank you very much.
I didn't fall asleep. Jason? Jason, you spare card?
I just have enough for the town board, but
Okay, here's mine.
I'll send you my contact.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks again, appreciate it.
I'm okay. Follow Jeannie on Monday.
All right, great, thanks again, Steve.
Thank you.
Look forward to talking more with you. All right, pending business. So, topic for discussion is the infamous and fun-loving Muscat property, our favorite topic. And you all saw the bids. Lily Bay, obviously the low bidder versus RAS Construction or RAS Excavating. I have tried to catch Tim. I have not caught him as of yet. I have a couple questions on the bid, mostly relegated to the inclusion of the barn, which we didn't ask for. The barn was to be left out of it. So there's $7,500 associated with that, which I wouldn't anticipate spending. I also talked with the DNR extensively regarding the permits, and I have some questions on the permits. So if we decide to do this, it might just be easier for us to fund the permits directly rather than have a pass-through from Lily Bay back to us, and I'm still working on that. I also, during the interim time, was able to contact a couple of people that are interested in barns, and I was able to get into a conversation there, if we want to pursue it, where a company called Beeman Board out of Green Bay would come up and take down the barn building. And they wouldn't pay us anything, but it wouldn't cost us anything. So instead of spending $7,000, this thing would come down. They're figuring it's going to cost them about $3,800 to take it down. They would take about, their estimate, they've been up and looked at it, about 80% of the building. He said there were obviously there's a tin roof on there. And he said whatever's left, they will put into a pile, and then we could include in the demolition of the other structures. There's no asbestos in it. So we do have an option there that we didn't really include, but I think in either way, it's a less expensive alternative to
On that,
having Tim take it down.
on the barn, I think we should get some local references on those, because I've heard some really bad horror stories from a couple guys within the last few years with a couple of these companies.
I think
This is the, this
That's
is the one that,
the outfit that did demo the barn on
Yeah.
our former homestead.
they've done a couple of them, yours, and I forget somebody else.
Obviously, yeah, they take the timber that they find valuable. There, if you look, there's a pile of junk wood there.
Yeah.
So,
as long as we know what we have to clean up afterwards and what that cost is gonna be.
Well, I don't know that we'll be able to determine what the cost is gonna be, because we don't know what's gonna be left.
Yeah.
But he said typically they would take 80% of a structure down and you'd be left with the rest. The good news is it's a tin roof and not shingled, so we wouldn't have to contend with that, and there's no contents in the building. So, and we can certainly look at it, it doesn't have to be part of this, but at least there's an alternative.
Right, compared to, you said
Comparing
like
to having to
7,000
spend,
to take it
yeah,
down.
or leave it there, because although it looks good from one side, it's not gonna look so great when the other houses are pulled down, and the back half of that building has collapsed in.
right.
So, and I just got that tonight, or I'd have given you copies of it. At any rate, I guess the real take on this thing is, what do we want to do with it? We have 27 is it 25,000?
25.
Yes.
We have 25,000 already in the budget that we've accumulated over the last couple of years towards the removal of towards the removal of these buildings. And we can go at them from a couple different ways. We can take down our $25,000 worth, but there is a cost associated with that because we're gonna pay a little extra because of the asbestos and the equipment. I have a separate detailed sheet from the asbestos people. They have to bring in different types of equipment in order to remove the asbestos, cranes and God knows whatever else, because they cannot, when they take these boards off the side, they literally don't want to break them. They want to take them off intact, put them in a dumpster and haul them away. Otherwise, they become, well, correct, they go floating around. And obviously, there's some added cost to go back and forth on this. So I guess I need your input on where we want to go. Personally, I'm of the mind that we have some extra cash. We should decide to spend it and get rid of this thing once and for all. Or we can go on a piecemeal basis, take some this year, put some money in the budget for next year, and take the remainder at that time. And so I leave that discussion up to you.
I had a couple questions on the
Yeah.
bid. Our RFP indicated that it including asbestos removal.
Right?
And there's a little discrepancies between the two bids here. So one says asbestos inspection, and the other one says, it's my understanding,
Are you talking the other one?
asbestos is testing and removal.
Well, the,
But I thought we had a separate company that was going to do the asbestos
Well,
removal
I
for
do.
approximately $20,000.
Well, that's what I was wondering on Lily Bays. It says including removal of asbestos cement siding, so,
they have, I have it here in my.
so is that included, are they already paying
Yeah.
someone to take that
What he
away?
did
Oh,
is,
okay.
they gave me all the detail on AAA Asbestos LLC out of Sturgeon Bay. There's inspection fees, you know, et cetera, and that's what he built into his bid.
Okay,
So he would subcontract with
That's my,
his own asbestos removal person, company, whatever.
correct, that would be
With
my
that,
take on it.
yeah.
I haven't been able to run him down just to confirm all that, but yes.
Okay.
So I would have him just make sure that he has that aspect, because he's applying for the permits here, but I think we could do that. Or, you know, he may do it once we agree on what permits he needs. We have to notify the state DNR, and then there's a fee, that's an annual fee. So if we have to take these all down in a year, we pay the fee again. But I do have a breakout for the asbestos piece. So, and there's a waiver for mobile homes. I mean, this is fairly complex to get accomplished. We only had the two bidders, so.
If we decide to do the whole shebang, except for the barn,
Right.
would we transfer some funds from our contingency fund then in order to cover it, or? I mean, because obviously we're gonna be short, we've got 25, and subtracting the barn, we're looking at 63,000, so.
Yeah, that would be my take,
Yeah,
that we
so-
would just amend the budget, transfer some of the money to do it. I mean, we could also take,
35,000 or whatever we need.
as dumb, not necessarily as dumb, but another option is we could also go and borrow the money and pay it off over time if we wanted to do it that way. I'm kind of reluctant to do that, because I
Yeah.
think we have sufficient funds.
yeah.
We do.
But I mean, those are the various options that are out
We've
there.
kind of put ourselves in a situation where we have those funds available rather than going and getting.
Yeah, I would just soon do that rather than do it, but I don't want to, want to give you some flexibility.
And our attorney has confirmed that whatever cost involved will be a special charge or assessment on the tax bill, and if it does go to foreclosure,
Right.
we would have a priority lien, that's my understanding.
Yes,
It's not
So we're
going to
covered
be
there.
erased.
yeah, and we've invested enough in that effort, so I think I have a
I think
stack.
we've definitely done our legwork on this one.
I hope so. I mean, I don't know what other things can be out there, but I would certainly like to get rid of it before there's a change in
Rules.
the family,
Or in rules too.
and then we have to, recircle the wagons and try and do this. And Linda's also had a conversation with C&W, because when we pull some of these buildings out, you're gonna see more C&W. But
They would be agreeable to some
they said they would
screening
do
or
some screening
vegetation.
so that we don't have another issue. So,
We've had absolutely no response from the parties, right? From the property owners, absolutely no response.
no, Randy Nesbitt talked to Nikki, I've lost track of time, January, February, before we went to court, and told her what we were doing, and nothing. I mean, absolutely nothing. And then we went to court and found that we had the Julian issue, which we
Right.
resolved that, the other air, and we served them. Never heard another word. And Amy Sullivan has given us the go-ahead that there's nothing else after what we've already done with the building inspector. And we have to certify that back to the DNR to make sure that they're in the loop, because that's one of their requirements. And there's the requirements for pulling down the mobile home, but I think we can meet or have met basically everything that they have, as long as Tim doesn't go below grade.
Well,
Which
we'd
you
also
shouldn't.
need a demo permit from our building inspector, right? Which those permits are kind of nominal when it
Yeah.
comes to
They're
demolition.
$75
Yeah.
typically.
Could cut them a deal. Anyway, yes. So, how would you like to proceed?
Where, do we need to specify where the overage is coming from, or not?
I'm sorry?
Do we need to specify where the shortage is coming from?
No, we have to come back and amend the budget. We'd probably just take it out of the general fund, I think, from what,
We have nearly 500,000 in designated funds, so.
and we have, I looked also at the reassessment, so I think we had that conversation at the Board of Review.
But
I think
that's-
we're ways out there, so if we really needed some fallback, we have parked another 125,000 or something in there.
Roughly, yes.
We
So-
only have 104 in there right now. It's a big step.
I know,
But we also have the fallback that it's gonna go on their taxes, that one way or another, we're gonna get something back, right?
yeah, I mean, it's gotta sell, but I mean, at the same time, we've been chasing this thing for 14,
11 years.
yeah, I mean, it's
Over 11
almost
years?
ready to
Oh,
fall
that's
in
good.
by itself,
Been
so,
years.
but,
No, the Coastal Byway Council will be very happy,
We might even get a blue ribbon or something from it.
even though it's not officially on the Coastal Byway.
Well, if we do Lily Bays, we're gonna have to remove that 7,500 for the barn, correct?
correct.
And then,
We'll leave something in it because we'll need to have whatever
Clean up.
remains of the barn.
that's
Or
what I
we
was
just,
gonna ask, we do that. How do we do that? Do we get a rough estimate from Lily Bay, tell them what the 80% number of cleanup of the barn, and there's gonna be 20% left?
Well, if his cleanup of the barn is 7,500 totally, we know it's not gonna exceed that.
right, I mean, maybe,
And that's still the most economical bid between the two.
And is there a way to do the barn before this, so that it's, as they're cleaning this up, they can take the remainder of the barn? So they don't have to come twice.
Well, conceivably, I could have the barn taken down, although this particular guy is concerned about getting it down on my time frame.
Being board? No.
Beam and board, yeah, because he was, when I told him, I think we put in the bid that this was work to be completed by the end of October, Amy? So I told him that, so I think he cringed a little bit, so we might be pushing it, but conceivably, I could call him up and say, take it down and leave us a pile of rubble. But we also gotta be prepared to go get rid of the rubble, so.
The raise order that was issued, I don't have that in front of me, but did that include the barn? I thought the raise order just included the homes. Maybe I'm wrong, but
The residential.
yeah. As if the barn was not included in the order, we probably are not entitled to do anything with the barn. We'd have to look at that order that was issued. I don't have it. Or I don't see it.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, let's do this. I'll carry this over to next month. We'll get the clarification on the issues I still have remaining with Lily Bay. I'll tell them that preliminarily, we will give him the bid if you're inclined to go that route. I'll firm up the raise order, find out where the barn sits in there, and if there's anything else I need to do, and I'll get that taken care of through either Amy or through the order. And I will see what this guy might, from Barn and Beam, what he might be able to do if it's included timing.
Does Linda said something about the asbestos?
Yes.
Was it the way it was written on Lily Bay's bid, Linda, or what were you saying? Or was it Ross that was the?
Mark has pointed out to me that it does say asbestos removal on those homes, so,
Okay.
right?
Yes.
Including removal of asbestos siding.
Okay. So I'll do that. If there's anything else in the interim, let me know. I'll firm this up with Tim, and we'll bring it back for next month and hopefully
Put it to bed?
have it done. Okay? All right. Next one's an FYI, fire protection. I've got indications from the city that they are inclined to go with our 3-year offer. It has to go to the finance committee meeting, which is, it has to go to the finance committee meeting, which I think is in early August, and then it'll go to the August city council meeting once it's approved at finance. But the mayor has given, as I understand it, his blessing. So hopefully, it's set up so that at our August meeting, if everything goes right, the chief will be here and we'll finalize the contract, which I think would be good. And move ahead for 3 years and not have to face that one again.
Yeah, that's great.
So, we are very light on the new business category. Like none, which is all right. We have a long meeting going anyhow. What we have we're down to the financial reports, which you have in your packet. So you have the budget versus actual and the transactions by date. And Amy's going to tell us of anything of any great significance in that area. Yes?
Yes.
Yours.
Perfect. The town received its fire dues at the end of June, and we've received our payments for the room tax revenues through May. We're currently about 12% of our budgeted revenue, so we're considerably pretty low, but we're hoping that June, July, August, and September yield pretty great numbers. We're currently almost at 100% of our postage budget, which was $2,600, and still have the November election and the mailing of the taxes. We did receive a CARES grant from the Wisconsin Elections Commission for $2,512.20, which will help with the postage cost.
Do you know, Amy, what the difference was on the room tax year over year?
I did not look at those numbers, no.
Okay.
But it
Maybe-
seems very, very light compared to other years.
So this was, the last report was May, so you're gonna get a June at the next meeting?
June, yep, July, August. Those are August and September, and even into October, they're pretty heavy months. So,
May was half of, May 2020 was half, I believe, of May 2019.
That's what I was wondering about. Because different comments have been made, but you don't
Or
know
very close to half.
what it boils down to. Okay, any questions on the financial reports or anything that Amy had? If not, a motion to accept would be in order.
I'll make a motion to accept the financial reports of June 2020.
I'll second that motion.
Motion by Mark, second by Linda to accept the financial reports. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries, thank you. Then we're down to correspondence, of which we have, this is the general transportation aids of $55,000. It's good news. And then we have WIAC Cares, our sub-grant for $2,512. By the way, we're going to have with the money that the state has given back to the towns to use for this COVID situation, we're gonna redo the glass area outside of Amy's office. So the top half of the glass will be permanently fixed and the bottom will be a slide-through. So she'll have a little less exposure, which I think is good. So she's working on doing that. We got the fire report. With the fire report not in your package is a note that Cherry Hills was cited for fireworks on the 4th of July. So if you hear anything.
The resort or the
Well,
condos? What?
The fellow that, I don't know the guy's name off the top of my head, but the fellow that had the fireworks display. And the-
John Martell,
Pardon me?
I believe it was John Martell.
Yes.
He owns the resort.
Yeah, he owns the resort. John decided to illegally have a fireworks display. Not only did he decide to illegally do it, he promoted it on Facebook. And the fire chief became aware of it and went out and talked to him. Didn't have much luck, came on a second trip with a deputy sheriff to discuss the situation. John, myself, and fire chief played telephone tag, or I shouldn't say telephone tag, but back and forth regarding his desire to have a permit issued, which the town does not do for fireworks displays. And I explained that to him. And more importantly, the reason the ticket was issued above and beyond is even if we were to issue permits, the fire chief would not have recommended one because of the dryness and the conditions. And we found that, to take a stubborn stance like that, although he's not going to pay $1 million, at least it's going to hurt his wallet a little bit.
What is
So,
the ticket?
I think it's $260. Right.
So he was not able to do it, or he didn't?
No, he did it, and the fire chief was there when he lit it off. He was there in his vehicle. So, I mean, it takes a lot of, it's
So
too
he
bad.
was told not to, but he did.
He was told not to, and the fire chief, and I give him credit for this, I mean, the guy did a nice job. He went out with a deputy with a body camera, and the whole thing was captured on tape. So it's not like there's any misunderstanding. So we have a lot of people in our community that abuse that. So hopefully some people will get the news that maybe there's less of it next year. There's a letter in here that Linda did. Thank you for that, Linda. I was unaware of it. To Steve Estes at Advanced Disposal, who took care of some trash. And I think, Derek, you took care of some on Friday. Thank you for that. That was parked in.
And a deer carcass.
And a deer? Did you skin it out? No. Also a note here from the Door County Coastal Byways and a copy of their financial report. And it looks like somebody else other than us have had more incidents from the sheriff's department. This is probably the first time, I think, that somebody else outscored us. So 258 to the town of Nassauapi, and we're at 241. So it's like There's some things we're not leading in. So that's all that's in the correspondence for this month. Our next meeting will be Monday, August 17th at 7. And we don't have the cable committee on here or the plan commission. The cable committee is Tuesday,
Tuesday, the 28th at 2 PM.
Tuesday, the 28th at 2 PM. Okay, that's the technology and communications.
Yep.
And Linda, you're the,
Wednesday, July 29th at 5:30.
July 29th at 5:30 for the plan commission. Okay. Anything else? Otherwise, the motion to adjourn would be appropriate.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All right.
Second.
Motion by Derek, second by Mark to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.